So today, we're going to dive into this really powerful story from the Gospel of Mark. It's a story that puts two very different kinds of faith side by side. On one hand, you have this hollow performance, the kind that's all for show. And on the other, you have this quiet, all-in surrender. It's one of those narratives that really makes you stop and ask yourself, what does genuine devotion actually look like?
Think about life for a second. A lot of us see it as a journey, right? And when you're on any journey, especially in a place you don't know, a guide is everything. A good guide can make a trip unforgettable, but a bad guide, well, they can get you completely lost. It's kind of the same with faith. It's this spiritual journey toward God. And who you decide to trust as your guide on that path, well, that's a huge deal.
And that's exactly where our story kicks off. Because all this spiritual journey, a false guide isn't just a minor problem. They can lead you to spiritual disaster. And Jesus spots some of these false guides operating in the one place you'd least expect it, the temple itself.
So he points to this group of guys known as the scribes. Now you got to understand, these weren't just some random people hanging around. They were the religious celebrities of their day, the top theologians, the legal experts. They were the ones everybody looked up to. But Jesus, he saw right through that polished exterior.
He gives his disciples a very direct warning. He just says, beware of the scribes. And you have to wonder, why? Well, in his eyes, all their public piety was just an act. It wasn't about honoring God at all, it was about building themselves up. Their faith had become this self-serving performance, and Jesus wanted his followers to see it for what it really was.
So what did this performance actually look like? Well, Jesus doesn't leave it to the imagination. He breaks it down for them, pointing out 4 specific things they did that totally gave away their real motives.
Okay, so first up, they loved walking around in these long, fancy robes. This wasn't a fashion statement, it was a status symbol. It basically screamed, I'm too important for manual labor. Second, they just loved it when people greeted them with respect in the marketplaces. It was a constant ego boost. Third, they were always jockeying for the best seats. The seats of honor, no matter where they were. And finally, and this is the really dark part, they would exploit the most vulnerable people, all while making a big show of how pious they were.
This contrast between their outside appearance and their inside motivation is just wow. The long robes on the outside were supposed to look holy, but on the inside it was all about feeling superior. The public greetings they craved, it wasn't about community, it was just a deep need for human praise. It was a kind of religious narcissism. And their long, beautiful prayers in public, get this, they were a smokescreen, a cover for cheating widows out of their property, the very people the law said they had to protect.
So right after exposing these false guides, the story takes this sharp turn. Jesus sits down and he shifts his attention away from the scribes and toward a pretty ordinary part of the temple, the treasury, the collection boxes. And he's not just glancing over. The text says he's observing, like he's watching closely, trying to see beyond the surface.
So you have all these wealthy people making a big show of their donations. You can almost hear the loud clang of the coins they're dropping in. Their giving is a performance, just like the scribes' prayers. But then, Jesus' eye catches someone else, a poor widow, the exact kind of person the scribes were taking advantage of, someone at the very bottom of the social ladder. And she walks up and drops in her offering. It's practically silent. All she has are 2 tiny coins, 2 lepta. It's such a small amount, it's almost nothing. In a place where everyone's making grand gestures, her little contribution is basically invisible.
And to put that into perspective for you, a lepton was the smallest, most worthless coin you could find back then. Her entire offering was worth just a tiny fraction of what a laborer would make in a single day. It was barely enough to buy a bite to eat. From any normal human perspective, her gift meant absolutely nothing. But Jesus, he saw something totally different.
Jesus immediately calls his disciples over. He knows he's got a major teaching moment on his hands. He's about to introduce them to a completely different kind of math, a kind of divine economy that doesn't work like ours. He's going to show them how God calculates value.
And this slide just lays it out so clearly. The rich, they gave from their abundance, from what they had left over. Their donations were big, sure, but they didn't really cost them anything. But the widow, she gave from her poverty. She didn't offer her extra change, she offered her entire living. In fact, the original Greek word here is bios, which literally means life. She wasn't just giving money, she was entrusting her actual life to God.
The theologian Charles Spurgeon really hit the nail on the head with this. The rich gave a lot, but they kept way more for themselves. The widow, she gave very little, but she kept nothing back. She gave it all. And that's why Jesus says she gave more than everybody else put together. The point isn't the amount of the gift, it's the scale of the sacrifice.
So this story isn't just about some ancient religious figures or how much money to put in a collection plate. It's a timeless lesson. It's holding up a mirror to our own lives and our own motivations, and it's asking us to make a choice about who we're really trying to impress.
You really have two paths laid out here. There's living coram hominis, which is just a Latin way of saying before people. This is the scribe's path. It's all about what people see on the outside, about getting that human approval. And then you have coram Deo, which means before God. This is the widow's path. It's focused on what's true on the inside, on trusting God and God alone. It's the choice between a performance and real devotion.
And that really brings us to the final question this whole story leaves us with. When we look at our own lives, our jobs, our families, our faith, are we living for the applause of the crowd? Or are we like the widow quietly offering our whole selves, trusting that the one audience that truly matters sees the truth in our hearts? Is our devotion just an empty shell, or is it a sincere, all-in offer?